She stood at the edge of the ballroom, a glass of untouched champagne growing warm in her hand, and watched her husband smile at another woman. Not just any woman. Her sister. The smile on Lord Ashford's face was one she had never seen directed at herself. It was gentle, familiar, full of a warmth that made her chest ache with a pain so sharp she had to remind herself to breathe. Celia Fairchild, now Celia Ashford, the Duchess of Ashford, stood perfectly still as the music swelled around her and the laughter of strangers filled the glittering hall. No one looked at her. No one noticed the way her fingers trembled against the crystal glass. She had been married to the Duke of Ashford for 2 years, and in all that time, he had never once looked at her the way he was looking at her sister now. As if Eleanor was the sun and he had been living in darkness. Celia had known, of course, when she married him, that his heart belonged elsewhere. The marriage had been an arrangement born of duty and desperation. Her family's estate was crumbling under debt, and the Duke of Ashford needed a wife of noble blood to satisfy the terms of his inheritance. It was meant to be a transaction, a quiet, dignified exchange of vows and property. Celia had told herself she could endure it. She had told herself that gratitude would be enough. He had saved her family from ruin. He had given her a title, a home, a position in society that most women could only dream of. She had no right to ask for his heart as well. But somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with him. She had not meant to. She had fought against it with every ounce of her will. But Alexander Ashford was not an easy man to ignore. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he was deep in thought and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved through the world with a quiet authority that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. And when he spoke, even the most powerful men in the room fell silent to listen. Celia had spent 2 years watching him from across dinner tables and drawing rooms, memorizing the sound of his voice, the rare flash of his smile, the way his brow furrowed when he read letters from his estate managers. She had learned his habits, his preferences, his small kindnesses, the way he always made sure the servants had extra coal in winter, the way he visited his mother's grave every month without fail, the way he sometimes stood by the window in his study, staring out at the gardens as if he were waiting for something that would never come. She had fallen in love with him slowly, quietly, the way ivy climbs a stone wall, and she had believed foolishly that perhaps one day he might come to feel something for her in return. That belief shattered tonight. Eleanor had returned from her travels abroad only 3 days ago. She was beautiful in the way that made people stop and stare. Golden hair, bright blue eyes, a laugh that rang through rooms like bells. She was everything Celia was not, outgoing where Celia was reserved, daring where Celia was cautious, radiant where Celia was simply quiet and steady. And Alexander, the Duke of Ashford, the man Celia had spent 2 years loving in silence, was looking at Eleanor as if the past had suddenly come alive again. Celia did not know the full history between them. She only knew that before the arrangement with her family had been made, Alexander had been deeply in love with someone else, that the woman had left England, that he had never spoken her name. Looking at him now, watching the tenderness in his expression as he bent his head to listen to Eleanor speak, Celia understood with sickening clarity. It had been Eleanor all along. The glass in Celia's hand slipped. She caught it before it could shatter against the marble floor, but champagne splashed across her glove, cold and sticky. No one noticed. The music played on. Alexander did not look her way. Celia set the glass down on a passing tray and walked quietly toward the terrace doors. The night air hit her face like a blessing. She stepped outside and let the darkness swallow her, and for the first time in 2 years she allowed herself to cry. She did not sob. She did not wail. She simply stood with her hands gripping the stone balustrade, tears sliding silently down her cheeks as the truth settled into her bones like winter cold. She had given 2 years of her life to a man who had never seen her. She had poured her heart into a marriage that had never truly existed. And now her sister, the sister she had loved and missed and written letters to for years, had returned to claim the love that should have been Celia's. Only it had never been Celia's to claim. That was the cruelest part. She had no right to feel betrayed. Alexander had never promised her love. He had promised her his name, his protection, his wealth. He had given all of those things without fail. He had never raised his voice to her. He had never been unkind. He had simply been absent, distant, a ghost in his own home, present but unreachable. Celia had thought she could live with that. She had thought the ache would fade with time. But standing on that terrace, with the music and laughter drifting through the doors behind her, she realized the ache had only grown. It had become a part of her, woven into her bones, and she could no longer pretend it did not exist. She stayed outside until her tears dried and her hands stopped trembling. Then she smoothed her gown, lifted her chin, and walked back into the ballroom as if nothing had happened. Because that was what a duchess did. She endured. She smiled. She pretended. The following weeks were a slow, exquisite torture. Eleanor visited often. She had taken rooms in a fashionable part of London, but she spent most of her days at Ashford House, filling the halls with her laughter and her stories. She spoke of Paris and Vienna, of the artists and musicians she had met, of the adventures she had experienced. Alexander listened to every word. His eyes followed her wherever she went. He smiled more in those weeks than Celia had seen him smile in 2 years. Celia did not complain. She welcomed her sister with open arms because she loved Eleanor, truly she did. Eleanor was not cruel. She was not malicious. She was simply oblivious, too caught up in her own brightness to notice the shadows she cast. She did not see the way Celia's hands tightened around her teacup whenever Alexander laughed at one of Eleanor's jokes. She did not notice the way Celia excused herself early from dinners, claiming a headache that was not entirely a lie. She did not see the quiet devastation happening right in front of her. And Alexander certainly did not see it. He was too busy rediscovering the woman he had lost, too busy remembering what it felt like to be happy. One afternoon, Celia stood in the garden pruning roses that did not need pruning. It was a task she had taken up to fill the hours, something to do with her hands while her heart slowly cracked. She heard footsteps behind her and turned, expecting a servant. It was Eleanor. "There you are," Eleanor said, smiling. "I feel as though I've barely seen you since I returned. You're always slipping away." Celia forced a smile. "I have duties to attend to. Running a household keeps me busy." Eleanor linked her arm through Celia's, a familiar gesture from their childhood. "You've become so serious. I remember when we used to run through the fields together, catching butterflies and climbing trees. Do you remember?" "I remember," Celia said softly. "You should come to London with me next week," Eleanor said. "There's a wonderful exhibition of paintings, and I've met the most fascinating people. You deserve a bit of enjoyment." "I don't think Alexander would approve of me running off to London." Eleanor's expression flickered just for a moment. Something passed through her eyes that Celia could not quite name. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual brightness. "Alexander," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "He seems well. The estate is thriving, I hear." "Yes." "And your marriage?" Eleanor asked, her tone light but her gaze sharp. "Are you happy?" The question hung in the air between them. Celia looked at her sister, at the face that was so familiar and yet suddenly so strange, and she did not know how to answer, because the truth was too raw, too humiliating to speak aloud. That she was married to a man who had never touched her, never kissed her, never looked at her with anything more than polite detachment. That she lay alone in her bed every night, listening to the silence of the house, wondering what was so wrong with her that she could not be loved. "I am content," Celia said at last. "Alexander is a good man." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then she squeezed Celia's arm. "I'm glad," she said. "I only ever wanted you to be happy." Celia nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. Nearly. But she held it in because she was a duchess and duchesses did not break. That evening at dinner, the conversation turned toward the upcoming harvest festival. It was an annual tradition at Ashford, a celebration for the tenants and villagers, and Celia had spent weeks planning it. She had organized the food and the music, arranged for games and prizes, coordinated with the village committee. It was one of the few things that gave her purpose, a way to feel useful in a life that otherwise felt empty. "The festival is next Saturday," she said, consulting her notes. "The tents have been ordered and the Morris dancers have confirmed." "I remember the harvest festival," Eleanor said, her eyes lighting up. "It was always my favorite time of year. The dancing, the bonfire, the cider. Do you remember when we were children, Celia? We used to sneak away from our governess and steal apples from the orchard." "I remember," Celia said again. Alexander set down his fork. "You should come, Eleanor. It would mean a great deal to the tenants. They remember you fondly." Celia's heart clenched. He had not asked her. He had not said the festival would mean a great deal to him. He had said the tenants. "I would love to," Eleanor said, "if Celia doesn't mind." All eyes turned to Celia. She arranged her face into a smile. "Of course not. You're my sister. You're always welcome." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. The night of the harvest festival arrived with clear skies and a crisp autumn chill. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting golden light across the village green. The scent of roasting chestnuts and spiced cider filled the air. Children ran laughing between the tents, and couples danced to the lively music of fiddles and pipes. It was beautiful. It was everything Celia had worked to create, and she had never felt more alone. She moved through the crowd, greeting tenants, accepting compliments on the arrangements, smiling until her face ached. Alexander stood near the bonfire, deep in conversation with one of his estate managers. He had not spoken to Celia all evening. He had not even looked at her. His attention was fixed, as it always was now, on Eleanor. Eleanor, who was dancing with the blacksmith's son, her golden hair catching the firelight, her laughter ringing out above the music. She was radiant. She was beloved. She was everything Celia was not. Celia found a quiet spot near the edge of the green, away from the noise and the crowd. She stood beneath an old oak tree, watching the celebration from a distance, and let the mask slip from her face. This was her life now, standing on the edges, watching, waiting for a love that would never come. She did not hear him approach until he spoke. "You look very far away." Celia turned. A man stood a few feet away, a cup of cider in his hand, his expression curious. He was tall, with reddish-brown hair and kind eyes, and he wore the simple clothes of a gentleman farmer. She recognized him vaguely. Nathaniel Bryce. He owned the neighboring estate, a modest property that bordered Ashford's northern edge. They had met a handful of times at local gatherings, but she knew little about him. "Mr. Bryce," she said, recovering her composure, "forgive me, I was lost in thought." "No forgiveness needed," he said, stepping closer. "Though I must say, a woman as lovely as you should not be standing alone in the shadows." Celia blinked. It had been so long since anyone had called her lovely that she had forgotten what it felt like. "You're very kind, but I am simply taking a moment to rest." "A well-deserved rest," he said. "I've been hearing all evening about the Duchess who organized this festival. The tenants cannot stop singing your praises. You've done a remarkable thing here." "It was nothing." "It was not nothing." His voice was firm but gentle. "I have lived next to Ashford for 10 years, and I have never seen the tenants so happy. That is your doing, Your Grace." Celia did not know what to say. She was so accustomed to being invisible, to her efforts going unnoticed, that his words caught her off guard. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, fragile and unfamiliar. "Thank you," she said quietly. Nathaniel smiled. "Perhaps you would do me the honor of a dance. It seems a shame to let all this music go to waste." Celia hesitated. She should say no. She was a married woman, a duchess, and it would not be proper to dance with another man. But Alexander was not watching. He was still by the bonfire, still focused on Eleanor. He would not notice. He would not care. "I would like that," she said. Nathaniel offered his hand, and she took it. They joined the dancers on the green, moving through the steps of a country reel. It was simple, uncomplicated, joyful. Celia found herself smiling, genuinely smiling for the first time in weeks. Nathaniel was easy to talk to, his conversation light and unpretentious. He did not speak of politics or business or the weight of noble titles. He spoke of his horses, his orchards, the way the sunset looked over the western hills. He made her laugh. He made her feel seen. And across the green, beneath the light of the bonfire, the Duke of Ashford turned his head and watched. The change was so subtle that Celia almost missed it. It began with small things, a glance that lingered a moment too long, a silence that stretched between them at breakfast. Alexander did not speak of what he had seen at the festival, but something had shifted in him. He was still distant, still preoccupied with Eleanor, but there was a new edge to his behavior, a tension that had not been there before. A week after the festival, Nathaniel Bryce sent a basket of apples from his orchard to Ashford House, along with a note thanking Celia for her hospitality. She read the note at breakfast, a small smile touching her lips. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant more to her than she could express. "Who is that from?" Alexander asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Bryce," Celia said, setting the note aside. "He sent apples." "I see." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You seemed quite friendly with him at the festival." Celia looked up surprised. "We danced once, that is all." "You danced with him," Alexander repeated. There was something in his tone she could not decipher. It was not anger, exactly. It was something closer to bewilderment, as if he had only just realized that his wife was capable of attracting the attention of another man, as if he had never considered the possibility before. "Is there something wrong with that?" Celia asked, her voice steady. Alexander held her gaze for a long moment, then he looked away. "No, of course not." But the tension did not leave his shoulders, and he did not speak again for the rest of the meal. The visits from Eleanor continued. She came to Ashford House nearly every day now, filling the rooms with her presence, her laughter, her stories. And Alexander continued to orbit around her like a moth drawn to flame. But Celia noticed something strange. Whenever Eleanor mentioned a particular memory from their past, a moment they had shared before Celia's marriage, Alexander's expression would flicker. A shadow would pass through his eyes. He would change the subject quickly, almost abruptly, as if the memories caused him pain. Celia did not understand. She had assumed that Eleanor's return would bring him nothing but joy, that she was the love he had been waiting for all along. But there were moments, brief and fleeting, when he looked at Eleanor with something that was not longing, something that looked almost like wariness. One afternoon, Celia found herself alone in the library with Eleanor. They were looking through old family albums, the pages filled with faded photographs and pressed flowers. Eleanor paused at a picture of the two of them as children, standing in front of the Ashford estate. Celia had forgotten the photograph existed. She must have been 6 years old. Eleanor was 8. They were holding hands and grinning at the camera, their dresses smudged with dirt from the garden. "Do you remember that day?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Vaguely," Celia said. "We played in the maze and got lost. Alexander found us." Eleanor's voice was soft, almost distant. "He was so angry, he said we could have been hurt, but then he bought us lemonade and told us not to tell anyone." Celia frowned. "Alexander was there. I don't remember that." "You were very young." Eleanor closed the album gently. "There are many things you don't remember." Something in her tone made Celia's skin prickle. "What do you mean?" Eleanor was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Did you ever wonder why Alexander agreed to marry you? The arrangement with our family was made so quickly. One day he was courting someone else, and the next he was engaged to you. Did you never question it?" Celia's heart began to beat faster. "I assumed it was duty. His inheritance required a wife of noble blood, and our family needed the money. It was a transaction." "It was never a transaction." Eleanor turned to face her, and her blue eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. Alexander and I were never in love." The words hit Celia like a physical blow. "What?" "We were never in love," Eleanor repeated. "The woman he loved, the woman who left England, was not me. It was someone else entirely. I only allowed people to believe it was me because the truth was too dangerous to reveal. The woman he loved was married to a man of great power and great cruelty. When her husband discovered the affair, he threatened to destroy Alexander, to ruin him, to strip him of his title, to destroy the Ashford legacy. The only way to protect him was for the woman to leave, to disappear, and for Alexander to marry someone else immediately, to prove to the world that the affair had meant nothing." Celia could not breathe. The room seemed to tilt around her. "You're saying that Alexander married me to protect himself from scandal?" "Yes," Eleanor's voice cracked, "and to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "The husband," Eleanor said. "He was a dangerous man. He swore that if Alexander ever married for love, he would destroy the woman Alexander loved. He would destroy her family. He would make sure no one associated with Alexander ever knew peace. When the arrangement with our family was proposed, Alexander saw a way out. By marrying you, a woman he did not love, he could satisfy the husband's demand. He could prove that the affair was truly over, and he could keep you safe." Celia stood up so abruptly that the album slid from her lap and hit the floor. The sound echoed through the quiet library. She stared at her sister, her mind reeling, her heart pounding against her ribs. "But the way he looks at you," she whispered, "the way he speaks to you, I thought." "He looks at me with guilt," Eleanor said. "He speaks to me with regret. I was the one who helped the woman escape. I knew about the affair from the beginning. I kept his secrets. And when I returned to England, I came to see you, not him. I came because I missed my sister. I came because I wanted to make sure you were all right." She paused, her voice breaking. "And because I am dying." The word hung in the air, cold and terrible. Celia felt her knees give way. She sank back onto the chair, her hands gripping the armrests. "What?" "There is a sickness inside me," Eleanor said quietly. "The doctors in Vienna told me. I have perhaps a year, maybe less. I came home because I wanted to spend what time I have left with my family. With you." Celia's vision blurred with tears. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I did not want your pity. I did not want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. I wanted to be your sister again, just for a little while." Eleanor reached out and took Celia's hands. "And because I needed to make things right. I needed you to know the truth about your marriage. Alexander loves you, Celia. He does not know it yet. He has spent so many years building walls around his heart that he has forgotten how to tear them down. But I have seen the way he watches you when you are not looking. I have seen the way his hands tighten when another man makes you smile. He is terrified of losing you, and he does not even understand why." Celia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You're wrong. He barely speaks to me. He barely sees me." "Because seeing you terrifies him," Eleanor said. "He married you to protect you, and somewhere along the way he fell in love with you. But he cannot admit it, not even to himself. Because if he admits it, then everything he did, everything he sacrificed will have been for nothing, and he will have put you in danger." The truth settled over Celia like a shroud. She thought of all the silent dinners, the empty nights, the cold distance. She thought of the way Alexander had looked at her on their wedding day, with something that was not love but was not indifference either, something that looked almost like grief. And she understood, for the first time, that he had been grieving the love he had lost, grieving the future he could never have, grieving the life he had been forced to build on a foundation of secrets and lies. She understood, but understanding did not erase the pain. She stood up, her legs unsteady. "I need to speak to him." Eleanor nodded, her eyes still glistening. "Go, but Celia, be gentle with him. He has been carrying this weight for a long time." Celia found Alexander in his study. He was standing by the window, staring out at the gardens, his hands clasped behind his back. He did not turn when she entered. She closed the door behind her and stood in the center of the room, her heart hammering. "Eleanor told me," she said. He went very still. For a long moment he did not move, did not speak, did not even seem to breathe. Then he turned, and the expression on his face was one she had never seen before. It was raw, open, shattered. "What did she tell you?" His voice was hoarse. "Everything," Celia's own voice trembled. "About the woman, the husband, the arrangement, why you married me." Alexander closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were bright with something that looked like tears. "I never wanted you to know. I never wanted you to be dragged into my mess." "I was already dragged into it," Celia said, "the moment I became your wife." "I know." He took a step toward her, then stopped as if he was afraid to come closer. "I know, and I am sorry. I am sorry for every moment of silence, every moment of distance. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I kept my distance you would be safe, but I only hurt you. I see that now." Celia felt her heart crack open, and all the pain she had been holding inside came spilling out. "Do you have any idea what it has been like? To be married to a man who will not look at me, who will not speak to me, who leaves me alone in this enormous house while he grieves for a woman I did not even know existed." "I know," he whispered. "I know, and I have no excuse. I was a coward. I was afraid. I thought that if I let myself feel anything for you, I would be putting you in danger. The man who threatened me, he is still out there. He is still powerful. If he ever believed that I loved you—" "I do not care about danger," Celia said, her voice breaking. "I care about you. I have loved you for 2 years, Alexander. I have loved you in silence, in loneliness, in desperation, and you never even noticed." He stared at her, his gray eyes wide. "You love me." "Yes." She was crying openly now, the tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you, and I have been so stupid, so foolish, hoping that one day you might love me back. But I cannot do it anymore. I cannot keep hopping. I cannot keep waiting for a love that will never come." Something shifted in his face. Something broke. He crossed the room in 3 strides and took her face in his hands, his touch gentle but urgent. "It has already come," he said, his voice shaking. "I have loved you for longer than I can admit. I loved you when you stood beside me at our wedding, looking so brave and so frightened. I loved you when you learned the names of every servant in this house within a week of arriving. I loved you when you argued with me about the tenant rents and refused to back down. I loved you when you organized the harvest festival, pouring all your heart into something that brought joy to everyone around you. I have loved you in every moment, in every breath, and I have been too afraid to say it." Celia could not move. She could not speak. She simply stood there, her face cradled in his hands, and let his words wash over her like rain after a drought. "I am sorry," he said again. "I am sorry for the years I wasted. I am sorry for the pain I caused you. I am sorry for making you feel invisible when you are the only thing I see." His thumb brushed away her tears. "If you can forgive me, I will spend the rest of my life making it right. I will spend the rest of my life showing you what you mean to me. I will never let you feel alone again." Celia looked into his eyes, those gray eyes that she had loved for so long, and she saw the truth there. She saw the guilt, the regret, the longing, the love. She saw the man she had married, the man she had thought she had lost, the man who had been there all along, hidden behind walls of his own making. "I forgive you," she whispered, "but you have to promise me something." "Anything." "No more secrets, no more distance. If we are going to do this, we are going to do it together. Whatever danger comes, whatever threatens us, we face it as one." "Together," he repeated. He bent his head and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender that it made her heart ache. "I promise." The days that followed were not perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, of uncertainty, of old habits that were hard to break. Alexander was still learning how to be open. Celia was still learning how to trust. But something had changed between them, something fundamental and irreversible. He held her hand at breakfast. He sought her out in the garden. He asked her opinions and listened to her answers. He looked at her, truly looked at her. and she saw in his eyes the love he had kept hidden for so long. Eleanor's health declined as the weeks passed, slowly at first, then more rapidly. Celia spent hours at her bedside, reading to her, talking to her, holding her hand. There was no cure, no miracle to be had, but there was time. Time to say the things that needed to be said. Time to laugh and cry and remember. Time to say goodbye. One afternoon, as autumn gave way to winter, Eleanor asked to speak to Alexander alone. Celia waited outside the room, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. When Alexander emerged, his face was pale and his eyes were red. He did not say what they had spoken about. He simply pulled Celia into his arms and held her, and she held him back. Eleanor passed away on a cold December morning with Celia and Alexander at her side. The snow was falling outside the window, soft and silent, covering the world in white. Celia wept, and Alexander held her, and together they mourned the sister, the friend, the woman who had brought them the truth that had set them free. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted, the flowers bloomed, and life returned to the Ashford estate. Celia stood in the garden one afternoon, watching the first butterflies of the season dance among the roses. Alexander came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Eleanor," she said, "and you, and us, and how strange it is that sometimes the darkest paths lead to the brightest places." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She told me before she died that I was the luckiest man in England, that I had been given a second chance and I must not waste it." Celia turned in his arms and looked up at him. His gray eyes were soft, full of a warmth that she had once thought she would never see. "And will you waste it?" "No," he said, and he smiled. "Not for a single moment." He kissed her then, gently, in the garden where the butterflies danced and the roses bloomed. It was not a kiss of passion or desperation. It was a kiss of quiet, steady love. The kind of love that had been tested and broken and rebuilt. The kind of love that would last. And Celia, who had once stood alone in a ballroom with a glass of warm champagne and a heart full of ache, closed her eyes and let herself be loved at last. The harvest festival that year was smaller than before. The tenants gathered on the village green, the lanterns swinging from the trees, the fiddles playing their cheerful tunes. Celia stood beside Alexander, her hand in his, watching the dancers spin and laugh beneath the autumn sky. Nathaniel Bryce was there, and he raised his glass to her from across the green, a gesture of friendship and respect. She smiled and nodded back. "You could dance with him again," Alexander said quietly. "I would not mind." Celia looked up at him, surprised. "You would not be jealous?" "I would be jealous," he admitted, "but I trust you and I trust us." She squeezed his hand. "Then I will stay here with you. There is nowhere else I want to be." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, and in that simple gesture was everything. The years of silence, the months of pain, the slow journey back to each other. The sister who had given them the truth. The love that had been hidden and found and chosen again. The music played on. The lanterns glowed. And Celia Ashford, the Duchess of Ashford, stood in the warmth of her husband's love and knew that she was finally, fully, completely home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you for watching and see you in the next amazing story.